Hello, everyone. This is the channel Take the Meat, Spit Out the Bones. This is a channel where we talk about educational research. Today, we're going to be watching a video from the Wall Street Journal where they're interviewing Roland Fryer, an economist and Harvard professor, talking about the educational tragedy of America. All right, so we're going to be watching this, just a clip, and we're going to talk about what he's saying about the 5 key factors that make schools effective.
A professor of economics at Harvard, a founder of Equal Opportunity Ventures, and a WSJ contributor, among other distinguished hats that he wears. Our topic today is his latest column in the journal under the headline, The Economics of Education Reform. It was well-timed, posted right as the latest national standardized tests showed that last year, 45% of 12th graders performed below basic in math, 32% were below basic in reading. And remember, these are 12th graders, seniors, preparing to go out into the world of college or the workplace. But here is what you write, Professor Fryer, quote, "The nation is facing the largest educational crisis in a generation, and that isn't even the real tragedy. The tragedy is that we already know what works."
So what he's going to talk about are the 5 key factors that work. And some of the factors, it's actually going to be in the description box too as well. So this is some of the factors. So he actually looked at different schools in Houston, and I think he said Denver, Colorado. He's going to explain that where he did these 5 factors. He implemented these 5 factors. So basically, he looked at he did a pilot program with 20 elementary schools that he wanted to turn around, and in the 2011-2012 school year. And basically what they did with the schools, they invested in human capital. They wanted effective principals, teachers in every school, did professional development in the areas of reading and math for principals and teachers. And they had a new appraisal system for principals and teachers and had performance bonuses and merit pay. So he also talked about how they gave feedback to teachers monthly. So several targeted feedback to improve their practice. Also, he's going to talk about having more instructional time, adding more instructional time where students got to read and do math instruction for all students 30 minutes each day, increasing that time. Also adding up to an extra 90 hours of math and reading instruction per year. So he basically increased more instructional time, used data to drive instruction too. So using running records, listening to students read, biweekly monitoring of student progress, using formative assessments, standard-based curriculum and assessments, and then also doing a lot of tutoring. So let me just add with the more instructional time, he focused on small group instruction in reading and math to provide more individualized attention to each student. So having 6 or less students in a group, which is very important. Oftentimes you're seeing a lot of whole group instruction, but increasing that small group instruction. Also high dosage of tutoring. So having tutoring for 4th graders to help both struggling students and those who are ready to move ahead. So special math tutors who are college graduates. So they had that with a tutor to student ratio of 1-3. So having tutoring, Saturday tutoring, in-school reading intervention for grades K-2, which is really important, by a reading interventionist, because this is where a lot of kids fall behind with phonics and phonemic awareness. And they also had Saturday tutorials 2 times a month for students who are struggling in core academic areas. And then they had a culture of high expectations for all students. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the elementary plan. Also, he had a secondary plan as well. So he had a secondary plan where he wanted students to also invest in human capital, similar to the elementary human capital. And then for more instructional time, it was a little bit different. So minimizing non-instructional time to carve out more time for instruction. So the school day lengthened by 1 hour, 4 days a week. The school year lengthened by 5 days and 10 days and 5 days in 2010 to 2011 and 10 days in 2011 to 2012. And so they also had optional Saturday classes, and they focused heavily on small group instruction, again, for reading and math. Use data-based using data to drive instruction, similar to what they did for elementary school. But for the high dosage tutoring, they had For secondary, they had in-school math tutoring for all 6th and 9th graders to help both struggling students and those who are ready to move ahead. And for students in grade 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, performing below grade level, a double dose of math or reading based on the subject in which they were more behind. And of course, they had a culture of high expectations for all students. They want 100% on grade level, 100% graduation rate, 100% acceptance to 4-year college or university, 100% of students taking at least one college level course, and 95% attendance rate for students and staff, and school parent contract. Wow. Okay, so he had all these different factors. He's going to talk more about what they did.
Unquote. So welcome, and to begin, what gives you the confidence to say that, and what has your research shown?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. And what gives me the confidence is we ran a couple of experiments in places like Houston, Texas, and Denver, Colorado, for multiple years, and we saw that when you put very common sense ideas into practice, you can actually dramatically increase achievement in a short amount of time. I mean, we took the worst schools in Houston, for example, in conjunction with Terry Greer, who was the superintendent at the time and a phenomenal leader. We took the worst 20 schools in Houston and made them above average in 3 years. And so that's the frustrating part, is that when you see students of any background languishing in schools that where it's commonplace for many of them to be testing below basic, that we allow it to happen, that there are solutions out there and we just don't, have the courage to implement them.
So he said we allow it to happen. So, okay. I don't necessarily disagree with him in that respect, but so some people may argue that this is the America that has been designed. This is a concerted effort to underteach children, to have low expectations of kids. The original purpose of the American schooling system is to do this, is to underteach, is to produce workers. So, when we say, do we allow it to happen, or was this designed for the original purpose for the American educational system? There's an article by Blanchett, 2013, where she writes, this is an article about African-American students and other students of color in special education. She talked about, citing the original purpose of the American educational system. She writes, to start to understand and comprehend potentially why the American educational system seems to only work well for a few privileged children and families, we must more fully understand its original purpose and intent. Historically, American public schools were designed for the purpose of serving the dual role of controlling and sorting children deemed problematic or undesirable by society. In 1779, Thomas Jefferson proposed 2-track educational system with 1 track for the laborer and 1 track for the learned. This system would allow a very small number of advance from lower to upper classes by raking a few geniuses from the rubbish. So the thing is that, what he's proposing is that we have the answers to improve American schooling system, but do we actually have the will to do it and courage to do it? Honestly, I would propose that we want workers, we want laborers, we don't want the learned. We want people to be working in this capitalist society where we don't want people to actually succeed. We want them to actually fail. We want a continuance of the underclass of society in this country, right? So do we really want to hold children to high expectations in this country? And then also too, as well, another great writer, Delpit, I reference her a lot on this channel. She wrote a book called Multiplications for White People. Her first chapter of her books, There is No Achievement Gap at Birth, she wrote that Jawanza Kunjafu suggests in an African-centered response to Ruby Payne's poverty theory, blaming poverty works out for school systems because then you don't have to change your lesson plans. So he says, yes, we want 100% success. We want to have high expectations for children. And we don't want to say, oh, it's poverty fault, it's racism's fault, it's this fault, that's fault. But oftentimes, we do, a lot of educators, a lot of people in the education system do blame, hey, when they look at a child, it's everyone else's fault but the school. system. It's everyone else's fault but the curriculum, right? It's everyone else's fault but the child. It's not about what's going on around that child. It's always the child to blame. And then obviously we don't have to change our lesson plans. We could just blame the child for that, right? But the thing is also, do we actually want people to succeed, right? So if, you know, okay. So do we really want people to succeed? So Asada Shakur said, no one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. Nobody's going to teach you your true history, teach you your true heroes. If they know that, knowledge will help set you free. So I think there's a concerted effort to underteach, undervalue, underperform students. And a lot of students who are impoverished, who are, who are Black, brown, there's a concerted effort not to give children the education they need to overthrow the people in charge in the society, So I think that is something very important. We're going to watch more clips of the video on what are the other elements, the factors, and then definitely we're going to dissect this a little bit more.
And digging into that research a little bit, so I gather it's based on what you call the 5 tenets that were educational strategies gathered from successful charter schools in New York. Talk a little bit about what it is that works.
Yeah. Well, let me give a little bit of background, because we all know there are charter schools and some public schools out there that are doing phenomenal things for kids who are in very challenging circumstances. And we see these one-off artisans, Eva Moskowitz in New York, Jeff Canada in the Harlem Children's Zone, and the list goes on and on. However,
and let me just tell you, a lot of people have a lot of criticisms on the people that he just named too as well. So you can look those up as well, because yes, let's continue.
Average charter school is no better than the average public school. And so you can do the intuition right away. If there are great ones, there must be bad ones if the average is 0. And so what we wanted to understand in the beginning was what makes some charter schools exceptional and other charter schools to be very poor performing. And so we went into New York and we followed charter school leaders around, some that were effective, some that weren't. And what we did was we boiled down 5 factors that explain 50% of the reason that effective charters are as effective as they are, right? And those are time on task, longer days, longer years.
That is very important, definitely, because a lot of children regress a lot over the summertime. And it's like, especially not even the summertime, it could be the weekend, right? For some teachers will say like, shoot, I taught this on Friday and all of a sudden you don't remember this on Monday, right? So it could be the weekend, it could be, a week break for the holidays or so. And the summer too as well. But it's so interesting. I don't know if you haven't watched another video of mine. So I taught a lot of undergrad and grad courses. I was a special educator for years, teaching children. Also, I now teach adults full time. And in my classes, I will always ask grad students who are education students learning to be teachers, or they're in-service teachers as well, just taking their grad courses. I always say, okay, in high school, how much time did you actually learn in every period? Okay, we have 45-minute periods. How much time was there active learning? And they will always say 20, 25 minutes, half the time. So this is very important. So time on task is very important, especially when you have behavior issues, you have other instructional interruptions in the classroom, announcements, cell phone, someone texting you, the principal texting you, someone knocking on your door telling you need to do attendance, right? Or latecomers. If you are in a lot of classes where students have disabilities, you have the service providers constantly coming in and out the classroom. So this is very important. So loss of instructional time is a huge issue. And then also too, we have to understand we had a lot of loss of instructional time during COVID as well, right? So a lot of people have not progressed much or close those gaps from COVID. So that's a huge issue.
That's number one. Number two is how they provide feedback to their teachers. And
This is important. Also, this is an important issue when you come down to unions. So if you're in schools, school districts that have strong unions, you can't provide certain feedback when you want to, right? So that's a huge issue. So when he talks about charter schools oftentimes don't have unions regulating how you can, interfere with instruction. So that is a huge issue. I'm not saying unions are the problem, because let me just tell you, I had health insurance for for unions, so, and then unions do back up teachers, but then unions can also defend very horrible teachers as well. So, and I know every teacher can account to that. So don't, don't go in the comments talking about, I am pro union, definitely. But at the same time, unions protect bad teachers as well. Okay, so that is extremely important to give feedback to teachers. But let me just tell you, teachers, educators are some of the hardest people to teach. Let me just say that again. I always find it funny when, all teachers, it's like, oh, not all, because they, not all, but a lot of teachers sometimes want to be like admin and all that. And I said, hold on. You think it's easier to teach educators or adults than it is to teach kids? Adult educators are the hardest people to teach. So even given the feedback, are they actually implementing the feedback? Right? So that's another issue, right? So you can give feedback all you want. Are they going to actually read your feedback? Are they going to implement the feedback? Are they going to take your advice? Because some folks are stuck in their ways. And let me just tell you, please don't get in the comments. I know you're going to argue with me, but a lot of teachers have not stepped outside the classroom and seen other people teach too as well. And I think that needs to happen a lot more, where you don't go in a classroom in a capacity as a teacher, but just be that fly on the wall, and you're like, whoa, right? So I've watched at least 3,000 lessons, at least 3,000 from teachers all over the world, all over different states, different racial, ethnic, religious, linguistic backgrounds. So I have a vast observation of teachers and coaching of teachers. Teachers are hard people to teach. Just like they say, like doctors make the hardest patients, teachers make the hardest students too as well. So are they implementing this? That's a big thing.
So in schools that were ineffective, like the middle school I went to, you'd give a teacher feedback once a year, and that'd be the only class you would actually teach, or he would actually teach with gusto. And
so he's talking about the performance, because teachers love to perform. I know, yeah, when you have people in the classroom observing, oftentimes everyone starts performing. It's like lights, camera, action, right? And this is not how it normally looks, right? So it's good to give feedback weekly, like to go in and give feedback to teachers to see if they're following through. Like, hey, I want to see this feedback that I gave you. I want to see the next time I come into your classroom, I want to see you implement it, right? So yes, this is definitely important.
The kids would fail, and you say, well, try again next year. The really effective schools gave teachers feedback more than once a month on very, very specific things to affect their pedagogy. One of the third was high-dosage tutoring, having kids in groups of 6 or less, 4 or more days per year.
Very, very, very important. In my company, and what we do, we definitely promote small group co-teaching models, small groups, period, because this yields higher effect sizes with kids, higher achievement with kids. People learn better from more individualized attention, small groups, than just a whole group. You have 30, 40 kids, 25, however much in the classroom. If you teach a group of 5, they learn more. You can get through more content with a smaller group. You can see what they know and what they don't know. You can move kids. You can know that there are pitfalls, there are gaps in knowledge. So it's very important to have small group instruction in your classroom, right? And if you're secondary, you need to have small group instruction. You got to pull a group. After you do that mini lesson, if you're in gen ed, after you do the mini lesson, pull some groups, pull alternative groups, pull small groups, reteach, pre-teach, enrich, close gaps. This is supposed to be a concerted effort to move children, right? And it has to be more complex instruction, right? Complex lesson planning, not the magic school.ai lesson plan. It's a great website, right? Not the chat GPT lesson plan. It has to be driven by data, how you know the kids, what you know, that how you need to close those gaps. This has to be intentional, right? Intentional small groups.
Another one was high expectations, a culture of high expectations. So ensuring that people understood that kids come with challenges of all shapes and sizes and colors and parts of the country. The question is, what do teachers believe they can ask of students, even though they're coming with these challenges? So the schools that we saw be really effective understood that poverty was an issue. They understood that 88% of their households were going to be female, single female-headed households. They still said, you know what, we are going to try to make up for that in the time that we actually have the students. And so that gives you a sense of what the tenets actually were. And they're very different than how we typically think about school reform, which is lower class sizes, more master's degrees for teachers. This really gets into the inner workings of how schools operate.
A belief system is important because and I'm sure, if you watch this, several videos of mine, teachers will say they low, they slow, they slow, they low, they low, they slow, and they slow, they low, right? I talk to a lot of teachers, and, I'm a teacher too. We complain. We complain about kids, right? And now I'm complaining about teachers right now. We have to have a belief system, even though they may come to your class in September, June, July, whenever you start off the school year, July or so. They may be so-called low, right? They may not be moving as fast as other kids, right? But you have to have a belief system by the end of the school year. They're going to be better than how you saw them in the beginning of the school year, right? You can move them years in 1 year, right? You can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. With diligent, intentional instruction, tying it to data, tying it to where students are, right? Targeting, closing gaps, targeting certain skill set, honing in on certain skill set, becoming better as an educator. Yes, you can. But we have to change our belief system. We have to have not a fixed mindset, a growth mindset. Like, these kids will. We have to say, you will, you can, right? Versus you can't and you won't. We have to will it into children, right? So that's extremely important.
So some of your interventions in Houston, then following those tenets, you write about lengthening the school year by 20%, bringing in hundreds of tutors, replacing many of the principals and staff, retraining others, setting those high expectations. And you write that one of the big differences was elementary school math students gained the equivalent of 4 extra months of learning a year. Less progress given those interventions on reading. Talk about a little bit about the magnitude of that difference in math and why math and reading, children maybe process that differently.
So he's going to talk about how they made insurmountable, effects on math, but not reading. I'm going to make another video. I'm going to make a series of videos on reading instruction. So definitely look out for that. But yeah, so math is different, but then also, why are kids not reading? Why is America struggling in reading? So definitely look out for that other video.
Yeah. Well, the magnitudes really were surprising. They were so surprising, in fact, that the research assistant who gave me the first results, I laughed at him and said, "This is impossible. I've never seen results this size." And I went home and I took 3 days and I just holed up and did all the analysis myself. And what he did wasn't perfect, but it wasn't enough to explain the large results. So that was incredible. And so, yes, you're right. 4 months extra. So it's the equivalent of a student getting a good school and going to school for 9 months, and a school getting an excellent school with these tenets I just described and going to school for 13 months, right? And it's almost 1.5 times as effective to be in those schools. And just imagine it this way. The racial achievement gap amongst fourth graders in America is roughly, about 9 months of school or 8 months of school. And so in 2 years, we could close the racial achievement gap, something that people have conjectured is impossible at that kind of scale, that we can see it in these artisan pockets, but could you really do it in a traditional public school where parents aren't signing pledges, where you don't have any selection of who goes into the school? These are traditional, regular old public schools.
But do we want to do it though? Right? Don't we want a permanent underclass in this country? Do we want everyone to succeed in this country? Do we? Do we really? Do we want to do it? Do we have the courage to do it? Why don't you let me know? Okay, so this is a video about America's educational tragedy. We have the answers in America, but does America have the courage to do it? Somebody will, I think another Ladson Billings would say we need to bankrupt the system, right? We need to bankrupt the educational system in this country and start it anew. Do we have the courage to rebuild the educational system in this country? Please let me know in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please watch the other videos on this channel. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.